As we've been reporting, President Biden has vowed to defend Taiwan if China attacks the island. He compared Taiwan's situation with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The White House claims the statement does not reflect a change in U.S. policy, but it's safe to say it does reflect a change in tone after decades of what's known as strategic ambiguity. Beijing responded almost immediately. An official statement from the Chinese government reads simply, "Taiwan is part of Chinese territory. We do not allow any country to interfere in China's domestic affairs." For more, let's bring in Michael Green. He's Senior Vice President for Asia, Japan Chair, and Henry Kissinger Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. Mike, thanks for your time. What do you make of this quick response from China to the president's remarks?
Surprising. Beijing is worried that not only the United States, but Japan, Australia, even Europe are becoming increasingly sympathetic with Taiwan, which is under constant pressure from Beijing, from the mainland, which is much larger, and which is, a democracy, not unlike Ukraine. So the Chinese are ever vigilant for any change, and President Biden's tone, as you said, was different. I don't think this represents a change in policy, but the tone is definitely stronger because of what we saw in Ukraine and because what we see Beijing doing to put more pressure on Taiwan.
Pretty quickly, the White House said the president's comments did not reflect a policy shift, but really is one of the most powerful statements of American support of Taiwan we've heard in quite a while, if not ever. What message does this send to Beijing?
Well, I started working in the White House in 2001 for President Bush, George W. Bush, and in April 2001, I think on CBS, he said in response to a question about a Chinese attack that the United States would rise up to defend Taiwan. And it was 20-some years ago, but there was a similar brief kerfuffle, and senior officials, including me, walked it back. I think this most recent statement by President Biden is a reflection of how seriously the United States and our allies take Chinese military threats to Taiwan. But I don't think the president intends to change U.S. policy. We have a one China policy. We've acknowledged China's sovereignty, and certainly our diplomatic relations are with Beijing. But in the Taiwan Relations Act passed in 1979, when we switched relations to the mainland, the Congress was very clear that an attack on Taiwan would represent a grave threat to our interests, and we would provide Taiwan with equipment to defend itself. And that piece of our interests hasn't changed. If anything, I think there's more concern. And you see in the tone of what President Biden says, the quiet conversations that are not for public about what we would do with our allies to defend Taiwan. I think President Biden let the soft part out into the public, what we usually only say internally. And I don't think the Chinese are completely surprised, but they're going to try to push back and keep us from actually changing policy, which I don't think was President Biden's intent.
Let me drill down deeper into your response. Would this then be, from your perspective, the strongest statement in about 21 years from an American president about Taiwan?
Yes, it probably would. And part of the reason is that after President Bush, in the years of the Obama administration, you had a president in Taiwan who was much more moderate towards the mainland, so that Beijing toned down its rhetoric. And then while the Trump administration had officials at senior levels in the Pentagon and the State Department and White House who were very worried about securing the Taiwan Strait, President Trump himself never, evidenced any strong sympathy or support for Taiwan. I think President Biden now is coming into office after being out for some time, seeing how serious the threat is to Taiwan, particularly supportive of democracies in the wake of what we saw happen in Ukraine. And he, showed a little more of the resolute feeling within Congress for sure, and within this administration, that an attack on Taiwan would not be acceptable. He said that very clearly. But we don't have a blank check security commitment to defend Taiwan automatically, the way we do with NATO or with Japan or Australia. And I don't think President Biden is trying to create one, because that really raises the stakes with Beijing in ways we're not ready for, and frankly, Taiwan's not ready for.
Let's make another comparison here. Let me pull on this thread some more. This is Mr. Biden's first tour of Asia as commander-in-chief. How does his approach toward the regional allies there stack up against the other presidents you mentioned?
When Joe Biden was vice president, China's leader Xi Jinping proposed to the Obama administration what he called a new model of great power relations between the U.S. and China, which basically meant to avoid conflict, the U.S. should, back off, should give China more room, should not always side with our friends and allies. And, within the Obama administration, opinion was split. And some said this was a good idea. Others said, no, we need to stick with our allies. We can't trust China. And Joe Biden, as vice president, was kind of on the fence. He sort of had a foot in either camp. But he's come back to office after, a decade of Xi Jinping, the leader of China, cracking down on domestic dissent, cracking down on Xinjiang and Hong Kong, pressuring Australia, the Europeans, Japan, and Taiwan. It's a different China, and so it's a different Joe Biden. He's much tougher. And if anything, there's much more continuity than change from the Trump to Biden administrations. And within the Congress, there's a pretty broad and deep bipartisan support for defending our allies, for supporting Taiwan. So it's not Joe Biden that's changed so much over the last decade, it's China under Xi Jinping.
With some certainty, we can say this first trip to Asia for President Biden is not going unnoticed. Michael Green from CSIS, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.